B was a young man from the village of Nemo, the eldest son of Ugad, who had recently lost her husband. With his father gone, Bai took on the heavy responsibility of caring for his grieving mother and his younger brother, Cheetah. Determined to secure their future, he arranged for Cheetah to start a business in the city while he remained in the village to manage the plantations their father had left behind. Bai made sure his family lacked nothing, working tirelessly to provide for them. But despite his efforts, his mother, Ugad, struggled deeply with the loss of her husband. She had been his backbone, his source of strength, and his closest companion. Losing him left her broken. She refused to eat, barely spoke, and often seemed lost in a world of her own. At first, Bai and Cheetah believed it was just a passing phase of grief, something that time would heal, but as months passed, her condition only worsened. She developed a severe ulcer and chronic gastritis due to stress and lack of proper nutrition, forcing Bai to rush her to the hospital for urgent treatment. After spending 2 weeks under medical care, Ugad was discharged, but the doctor insisted that she needed ongoing attention. Bao had to find a personal nurse to check on her daily, someone who could ensure that she followed her treatment and maintained a proper diet. He found a nurse, but the arrangement did not last long. Ugad, still trapped in her grief, was uncooperative. She would push away any attempt at care, refusing help, and sometimes taking her frustration out on the nurse. The situation became unbearable, and eventually the nurse resigned. Soon after, Ugad had another severe health crisis, leading to another hospital stay. This time, Baya was more desperate than ever. With Cheetah away in the city, he carried the full weight of the situation alone. It was during this second hospitalization that fate brought a new nurse into their lives, Yag-Gaz. Unlike the others, she took a special interest in Ugad's case, drawn to the older woman's sorrow. When she learned about the depth of Ugad's grief, she sympathized with her deeply. Fear not, with her deeply. Yag-Gaz understood the pain of losing a loved one because she had seen her own mother go through something similar. More than medical treatment, she knew that what Ugad truly needed was love and care. Instead of treating Ugad like just another patient, Yag-Gaz took the time to observe her, learning her triggers and emotions. She was patient even when Ugad tried to push her away. She never reacted negatively, never got frustrated, and little by little, she found a way to break through. She would tell Ugad stories, bringing laughter and warmth into the older woman's life. Slowly, the barriers that grief had built around Ugad began to crumble. She started looking forward to Yag-Gaz's visits, eating what she was told, and listening to the young nurse's advice. When the time came for her to be discharged again, the doctor warned Bea that he needed to secure a long-term nurse immediately. He feared that without proper care, Ugad's health could deteriorate once more. But this time, I didn't have to search. Ugad had already made up her mind. She wanted Yag-Gaz and no one else. Surprised but grateful that his mother had finally bonded with someone, I approached Yag-Gaz with an offer to be his mother's private nurse at home. To his relief, she agreed. From that moment on, Yag-Gaz became a daily presence in their home, not only bringing medical care, but also the comfort and warmth that Ugad desperately needed. I couldn't help but notice the remarkable improvement in his mother's health after Yag-Gaz started caring for her. The once frail and withdrawn woman was now cheerful, active, and full of life again. He was deeply grateful to Yag-Gaz for the transformation she had brought to their home. To show his appreciation, he increased her salary and often surprised her with thoughtful gifts. More than anything, he wanted to ensure that she remained in their home, fearing that if she ever decided to leave, his mother might fall back into her old state of grief. His gestures of gratitude did not go unnoticed by those around him, especially his mother. Ugad, having grown attached to Yag-Gaz, saw something more in their relationship, something Bai himself seemed oblivious to. One evening, after Bi took Yagaz out to a nice restaurant as a token of appreciation, Yugad confronted him with a knowing smile. She teased him, suggesting that he had feelings for Yagaz and that it was time for him to consider marriage. Bai, however, quickly dismissed the idea, insisting that he only saw Yagaz as a sister and that his kindness was merely out of gratitude. He found the whole idea ridiculous, unable to see what his mother and others were beginning to realize. Despite his denial, Yugad was not convinced. She had observed the way Bai looked at Yagaz, the little extra efforts he made for her, and the unspoken connection between them. To her, it was obvious that they would make a perfect couple, and she was determined to push her son in that direction. Yagaz, on the other hand, was slowly beginning to develop feelings for Bai. His kindness, his generosity, and his sense of responsibility were qualities she admired deeply. She started to hope, even if just a little, that there might be something more between them. But no matter how much she tried to make herself noticeable as a woman, Bai remained blind to her affection. He continued to treat her with the same respectful kindness, never once considering the possibility of love between them. Even as Yugad continued to encourage him to see Yagaz in a different light, he stubbornly refused to entertain the thought. To him, she was simply the wonderful caregiver who had saved his mother and nothing more. This frustrated his mother, who feared that if Bai did not act soon, another man would come and take Yagaz away from their family. As time passed, Yagaz eventually realized that Bai had no romantic interest in her, and it was a painful truth to accept. She had held onto a small hope that one day he might look at her differently, but that day never came. So she buried those feelings deep within her heart and focused entirely on her job, refusing to let her emotions affect her professionalism. Meanwhile, God did not give up trying to convince Bi to reconsider. She reminded him that love sometimes takes time to recognize, urging him to think about the future. But I remained firm in his belief that he was simply being kind and appreciative. Nothing more. In his mind, there was no misunderstanding. His intentions were clear. What he failed to see was that in his effort to keep Yagaz close as a caregiver, he had unknowingly led her to believe there could be something deeper. While he remained convinced that he was acting out of pure goodwill, those around him saw a man who was refusing to acknowledge what was right in front of him. Sheeta returned to the village for their father's remembrance ceremony and immediately noticed the deep connection between Yagaz and their mother. He saw how Yagaz moved around the house with ease, how she cared for Yugad like a daughter, and how his mother seemed the happiest she had been in a long time. It didn't take long for him to also notice Bi's special treatment toward her, the gifts, the constant praise, and the unspoken bond they shared. At first, he assumed that his brother and Yagaz were already together, that they were simply waiting for the right time to make it official. When he teasingly asked his mother why she hadn't told him about his future sister-in-law, Yugad was taken aback. She sighed in disappointment and revealed that despite all her efforts to push Bi toward Yagaz, he stubbornly refused to consider her as anything more than a caregiver. Sheeta was shocked. He couldn't understand how his brother could be so blind to the obvious. More than that, he felt that Bai was taking Yagaz for granted, failing to see the rare and special woman she was. That was when he decided to take matters into his own hands. Unlike Bai, he saw Yagaz for who she truly was, kind-hearted, patient, and incredibly selfless. So he started spending more time with her, getting to know her beyond her role as their mother's nurse. As the weeks passed, Sheeta and Yagaz grew close. She found herself drawn to his lively energy, his confidence, and the way he openly admired her without hesitation. Unlike Bai, Cheetah made his feelings clear from the beginning. He didn't hide behind gratitude or obligation, he genuinely liked her. Eventually, he confessed his love and asked her to be with him. Yagaz hesitated at first, still unsure if Bai truly had no feelings for her. But as time went on, and Bai continued to treat her the same way, she accepted Cheetah's proposal. Their relationship blossomed, and soon Cheetah decided he was ready to marry her. When he told his family about his plans, Ugad was thrilled. She had always wanted Yagaz to be part of their family, and if Bai wouldn't step up, she had no objections to Cheetah marrying her instead. But when Bai heard the news, his reaction shocked everyone. He outright rejected the idea, stating that Cheetah could not marry Yagaz. When pressed for a reason, he finally declared that Yagaz was already his wife-to-be. The room fell silent. Cheetah and Ugad were stunned. For months, Bai had dismissed any suggestion of marrying Yagaz, insisting that she was nothing more than a sister. And now, suddenly, when another man wanted to marry her, he was claiming her as his own. Anger flared between the brothers. Cheetah reminded Bai that he had never once expressed interest in Yagaz and that he had no right to interfere now. Bai lashed out, accusing his brother of stealing the woman he had been waiting for, but Ugad wasn't having it. She called out Bai's hypocrisy, reminding him of the countless times she had begged him to marry Yagaz, only for him to dismiss the idea. "You refused her," she said firmly, "and now you have to live with that choice." Yagaz, witnessing the argument, felt nothing but disappointment. She had waited for Bai to see her, to acknowledge her, and he never did. And now that she had moved on, he was trying to claim something that was never his in the first place. Despite Bai's protest, Cheetah and Yagaz stood firm. The wedding preparations moved forward, and the family refused to let Bai's sudden change of heart derail everything. But deep down, Bai wasn't ready to accept defeat. If he couldn't have Yagaz, then neither could Cheetah. And with that dangerous thought in mind, he made a terrible decision, one that would change their lives forever. Bai couldn't understand why he felt so angry. For the longest time, he had told himself that Yagaz was nothing more than his mother's nurse, a kind and dedicated woman he deeply respected but never considered romantically. But now, knowing that Cheetah had won her heart, an unbearable jealousy consumed him. It felt as though something that had always belonged to him was being taken away. The worst part was that no one saw the situation from his perspective. His mother, instead of supporting him, dismissed his protests and reminded him that he had countless opportunities to pursue Yagaz but had refused. Cheetah, his own brother, treated him as if feelings didn't matter, arguing that since Bai had never claimed her, he had no right to stop their marriage. And Yagaz, she didn't even look at him with the same warmth anymore. There was no hesitation in her decision to choose Cheetah, and that realization stung. Bai felt trapped, powerless, and humiliated. He couldn't bear the thought of watching his brother marry the woman he now realized he loved. But instead of confronting his emotions in a healthy way, he let his bitterness fester into something dangerous. As the wedding day drew closer, I grew more distant from his family. He barely spoke to his mother, avoided conversations with Cheetah, and stopped acknowledging Yagaz altogether. Deep down, he knew he had no real claim to her, but the pain of rejection clouded his judgment. The night before the wedding, he approached Cheetah with a bottle of alcohol, suggesting they have one final drink together as brothers. Cheetah, unaware of his brother's true intentions, accepted the offer. They drank, laughed, and reminisced about their childhood. But beneath Bai's forced smiles was a sinister plan. The alcohol had been laced with poison. As they sat together, I watched, waiting for the effects to take hold. But before anything could happen, Cheetah mentioned something unexpected. He had already eaten at Yagaz's place and wasn't planning to drink much. That single decision saved his life. Moments later, as Cheetah made his way back to his room, Bai sat alone, staring at the remaining poison in his hands. If he couldn't have Yagaz, if his own mother refused to take his side, if his own brother was willing to betray him, then what was left for him? In a final act of despair, he drank the rest himself, sealing his fate. The next morning, Yugad woke up early, eager to prepare for the wedding. But when she tried calling Bao to join her in waking the uncles, he didn't respond. Concerned, she entered his room and was met with a horrifying sight, her eldest son lying motionless on the bed, a bottle of poison by his side. A scream tore through the house, waking everyone. Chaos erupted as people rushed to understand what had happened. But amidst the panic, there was another shock Cheetah was missing. Fear gripped Yugad's heart as she frantically searched for him, but he was nowhere to be found. Desperate, she ran to the hospital where Yagaz worked, praying for some kind of miracle. And there, in one of the hospital rooms, she found him weak but alive. Yagaz had saved him, suspecting something was wrong when he suddenly fell ill the night before. When Cheetah learned of Bi's fate, he was devastated. He never imagined that his own brother would go so far. The wedding was called off, and grief consumed the family. In the end, Bai's jealousy had destroyed not only himself, but had left a wound in their family that would never fully heal. Cheetah and Yagaz eventually married, but the joy of their union was forever overshadowed by the brother who couldn't let go. The days following Bi's death were filled with sorrow and confusion. The family was left in disbelief that the man they had known, strong, responsible, and dedicated to his loved ones, had allowed jealousy and pride to consume him to the point of self-destruction. Yugad was particularly devastated. She had already lost her husband, and now, in the most heartbreaking way, she had lost her eldest son as well. The weight of the tragedy was unbearable. She blamed herself, wondering if she had pushed him too hard, if she had failed to make him see what was truly important before it was too late. That no amount of questioning could bring Bai back. Meanwhile, Cheetah struggled with his emotions. His love for his brother had always been unwavering, and it pained him to know that Bai had harbored so much resentment toward him. He had never intended to take anything away from Bai. He had only followed his heart, but in doing so, he had unknowingly contributed to his brother's downfall. That guilt sat heavily on him even as he recovered from the poison that had nearly taken his life. Yagaz, too, was filled with sorrow. Though she had never loved Bi romantically, she had once admired him as a kind and respectable man. To see him unravel so tragically was a painful experience, and she couldn't help but wonder if things would have been different had she been able to change his heart sooner. Despite the grief, life had to move forward. Cheetah and Yagaz still loved each other deeply, but the wedding was postponed indefinitely. Neither of them could celebrate in the wake of such a tragedy. Yugad, still battling the pain of losing Bai, fell into another deep state of mourning. This time, however, she was not alone. Yagaz remained by her side just as she had before, guiding her through the healing process. She refused to let Yugad slip away into despair again. With time and with Yagaz's constant care and support, Yugad slowly began to find peace, but the household was no longer the same. The absence of Bi was a shadow that loomed over them, a constant reminder of what had been lost. Even though Cheetah had done nothing wrong, he often felt the weight of Bi's decision pressing down on him. It was a burden he carried quietly, knowing that no matter how much time passed, a part of him would always wish things had turned out differently. But Yagaz, ever his pillar of strength, reassured him that they could not allow Bi's actions to define their future. They had to live, not just for themselves, but for Yugad and for the family that remained. Months later, when the pain was not as raw, Cheetah and Gaz finally decided to go through with their wedding. It was a small, quiet ceremony, nothing like the grand event that had once been planned, but meaningful in its own way. Yugad gave them her full blessing, grateful that despite everything, love had found a way to endure. After the wedding, Cheetah and Gaz moved to the city where they started their new life together, but they could not leave Yugad behind. Recognizing that she needed to be surrounded by family, they brought her with them, ensuring that she was never alone. Though she still had moments of sorrow, she was comforted by the knowledge that at least one of her sons had found happiness. And so, life went on. The pain of losing Bi never truly faded, but with time, it became a part of the past, a tragic lesson on the dangers of pride, jealousy, and unspoken love. Cheetah and Gaz built a home filled with warmth and understanding, determined never to take love for granted. And in that home, Yugad found solace, knowing that even in the face of loss, there was still hope for the future. Time passed, but the weight of Bi's actions never truly left those he had left behind. Cheetah and Gaz worked hard to build a life together, but they both carried the scars of that fateful night. Yugad, though she had moved to the city with them, often found herself lost in thought, her mind drifting to memories of her eldest son. She would wonder how different things could have been if he had only seen the love that had been right in front of him all along. Regret, however, was a useless emotion when change was no longer possible. All they could do now was live in a way that honored both the love they had and the painful lessons they had learned. Cheetah, once the carefree younger brother, had grown into a man burdened with wisdom he never asked for. He knew now that life was too short to let pride and fear hold one back. If Bai had only spoken his heart earlier, if he had admitted his feelings before it was too late, perhaps things would have ended differently. But love, when left unspoken, turns into regret, and regret can be one of the heaviest burdens to carry. The tragedy of Bi's story is not unique. Too often, people let their emotions fester in silence, convincing themselves that they have all the time in the world to make things right. But life does not wait. It moves forward with or without us, and the opportunities we ignore today may never come again. In many ways, Bai represents those who hesitate, who let fear dictate their actions until they lose the very thing they wanted the most. His downfall was not just jealousy, it was the refusal to acknowledge his own heart. He had love within reach, but let it slip away because he was too afraid to face it. In the end, his pride cost him everything, and the saddest part was that it didn't have to. If only he had been honest with himself, if only he had chosen love instead of pride, his story might have had a different ending. But life does not give second chances to those who refuse to act. It only moves forward, leaving behind those who hesitate for too long. This story serves as a reminder that love and happiness are choices, not guarantees. We must be brave enough to speak our feelings before it's too late. We must not let fear or pride keep us from embracing what is right in front of us. Bai's story is a cautionary tale, a lesson on how easy it is to lose something precious when we take too long to realize its value. His regret came too late, and his pain led him down a dark path that no one could pull him back from. But for those who hear his story, there is still time. Time to confess feelings, time to fight for what matters, time to choose love over fear. Our fear. Because at the end of the day, the greatest regret is not in loving and losing, but in never having the courage to love at all,